Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Eduardo Baraf, founder of Pencil First Games, a boutique publisher of delightful, high-quality board and card games. They're best known for their nature-themed games, and their latest title, Floriferous, is currently on Kickstarter. Ed, welcome to the Binge. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I am excited as well. I get really excited when I get a chance to talk to people who have cranked through the sheer number of campaigns you've done.
Sure.
For one. Sure. And the games you've created. You are just a fountain of knowledge, I'm sure. And I think this is going to be a fun half hour. So I really wanted to start off really quickly, just kind of, and I do this with a lot of my guests, but I really am curious as to how you got into the industry in the first place. Kind of when did you first start designing games? Like when did this kind of thing all take place?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me think of the quick version of it. The quick version of it is, so I played a lot of video games and board games, but they were like the standard Uno, Monopoly, Risk, that kind of fare board games as a kid. And then I went to the University of Michigan and wanted to like make video games, and no one was doing it. So I started Wolverine Soft, which was like a group of people making indie video games.
Oh, cool.
In U of M. And so I've had the good fortune basically from college on, even though I was a Japanese major, to make video games or some technology for my entire career. And so it was really in the video game space that I started producing games and designing games, and not board games, but video games, that I worked for a company called Mind Control Software in the Bay Area. And the art director there, Thomas Denmark, actually designed Dungeoneer and did all the art for Dungeoneer. And at the time, he was working on a game called Murder of Crows and was struggling with some of the design and making it interesting. And anyway, he was like, "Hey, you want to work on this board game with me?" And at that time, I hadn't done anything like that. Also, was at that company where I had the typical entry point into board games with like Catan, Small World, Ticket to Ride, like playing at the office. That was really like, oh, there are other new board games that aren't the ones you find at Target type of thing. So Murder Crows ended up taking a really long time, but it wasn't until a few, maybe 4 or 5 years later, I was working at a company called Blue Fang Games, the maker of Zoo Tycoon on the PC. But it's a long story, but that the company was closing and we had some online games at the time. And when an online game or even a mobile game ends, it just disappears. Like you can't ever play it again.
Yeah.
The server go down, it's gone. And I had this very strong reaction to that. And I was like, it was just a real impetus to like if I make a board game, like even if it doesn't get sold, I make a prototype of the thing, like in 30 years, I can play that thing. And that's how I started designing Liftoff, Get Me Off This Planet. Mm-hmm. Sent it along to a bunch of publishers, waited years to find out that people weren't picking it up. And then it was many years later, we were at a game night thing actually with Aldo from Impressions, Aldo Ghiozzi. He's going to kill me for not pronouncing his name. Like Aldo. I haven't tried in so long. Aldo. But Richard Bliss, and it was actually at his place. And then Teal Fristo, who also was on Kickstarter. And my wife was like, "Why don't you bring Liftoff?" And I did, and we played, and people had fun. And they're like, "Why isn't this on Kickstarter?" And I was sort of like, "What do you mean? Like Kickstarter, isn't that like it just wasn't a thing that was in my headspace." And so
for board games, right? Kickstarter for board games, probably back then seemed like a foreign concept, right?
Yeah. I was like, I thought you did that for like your special toaster or whatever. And so anyway, basically went ahead and did the Kickstarter. Ultimately it was successful, and that then began a lot of stuff. So it was really, I've been doing games my entire career and life really. But, those were the things that sort of propelled me into the board game space for sure.
And Mike, like you have a full-time job aside from this as well?
Yeah.
How?
I'm a busy guy. I am executive producer at Machine Zone, Apple Oven. Apple Oven acquired Machine Zone this last year, and I make mobile games. So these are much bigger teams. 50, 60, 80 type people, cross discipline, engineers, QA, art, design, UI, the whole gamut. Board games is a great contrast to that because one, it's WYSIWYG. It's like what you see is what you get. Like you don't have this. You don't have to have an engineering team and a platform and a technology. You don't have to worry about a lot of these little things. So you can sort of make what you want more directly. That's it. But it's a great opportunity for me. We really are a boutique publisher, and it's really a lot about ultimately, like, there are a lot of fantastic people who work on all these games, but in terms of what we do at Pencil First Games, it's usually a game I want to make with person I want to make or people I want to make this game with, or just, so they're all different, but they're all, for me, it's like a jobby, right? Like it's a hobby where it's a little bit more than like your typical hobby, but it's an opportunity to work with people and make stuff that isn't, professionally, when you're making a game with a lot of people in video games, right? It's got to make money and like, it's got to hit a deadline. And it's like there are all these, checks and balances in place because it's so expensive. For me, the board game space is great creatively because I don't have to shove it out the door if I don't think it's ready, or I don't have to, cut that little frill from it to save a buck if I don't care to save a buck, right? Like I can just say, we're not going to save a buck. We're going to do it with the extra thing in the inside of it, and we're just going to make less money. But that's okay because we're trying to make something that is, really high quality and crafted and fits the brand, and is what we're doing. And so far, folks are responding to it. We're still pretty small, right? Like bigger than not. I think our longevity out is bigger than our success to a degree, but Herbaceous has done really well. Skulk Hollow has done really well. Floriferous has had a really strong start on Kickstarter for sure. But when you get to the bottom of these, it's not like I could quit my job, right? Like it's definitely a growing business, but not one that's suddenly.
I like the term you came up with, a jobby. I haven't heard that before. That's good. I'm going to steal that. That's awesome.
No, please. I stole it from somebody. I can't remember where I got it from, but right. It's that line where you're like, because it really is a hobby. It really is.
Oh yeah. Nobody's driving Porsches making board games, right? Like,
yeah. But it's you made that, you sort of said, I do a lot of things, but this is my fun thing. This is the kind of thing that it's like a hobby where I enjoy it and I get satisfaction from it and recharge from it, as opposed to drain. So it's got that sort of hobby, but like at some point it's like, it's a lot of stuff it involves a lot of nights and weekends, right? Like it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, people, and I think that's the illusion some people have coming in. I'm just sharing my screen for people watching. You've got 16 campaigns, I think, right? You've done all together.
Yeah, Floriferous is the 16th. Though, gaming, with Edo, was
you're raising funds for your YouTube channel and so forth, right?
So it's not that many games, but
I was running the numbers. I think you've done like, I think north. I always put this in Canadian dollars because it sounds larger, as our viewers know. But you hit, I think, over 600,000 you've raised across your different campaigns, which is a lot of money.
Absolutely. It's incredible. Kickstarter has allowed me and the folks involved on all the Pencil First games to work together, create something we love, and share it with people. I think the biggest takeaway, though, is when you run a Kickstarter, almost to any scale of success, at least that I've ever seen. I'm sure there's gigantic scales, but like with anything within like I would say any Kickstarter that's under $100,000, like when you scale the success, but the cost of the product, the cost of the platform, all the deductions, and then the like ever explodingly growing shipping and freight and all the issues that we're seeing in the industry right now, a lot of them are break even, make a couple extra bucks, but not a lot. My first one was a huge loss, actually, because I made some mistakes early on. It was too expensive at liftoff, and it was, when it all got added in the box, it was more than 2 kilograms or whatever the line in the sand was. So like all of my international shipping like literally doubled, and it raised 55, but it cost me 70 or whatever, 65, right? And so I think it's absolutely true that it's raised that amount of money, but that money by and large goes to getting the games into people's hands. And so, and that's not to say over the years, games haven't been successful at retail. It's a big deal when you have a game like Herbaceous and you can reprint it without a Kickstarter, right?
Yeah.
Because then but
I think that's where like people probably misunderstand, right? Like I was talking to somebody recently about a campaign that I'm running, and they said, what's your break even? I said 15,000, and they said, wow, it costs 15,000 to make a game. I said, no, it doesn't cost 15,000 to make a game. But when you layer in that tax that you're eating, when you now with the new Euro rules, right, shipping in 20%, you're going to off the retail pledge value, you're going to eat shipping costs, market acquisition costs. If you're doing a pledge manager, if you're doing any kind of social media amplification, like all those things added up can be sizable. And then it's if you're kind of playing in the zone, as you're saying, where you're kind of under kind of 100,000. It's not even like you can scale. It's not even like you have the economies of scale in terms of the production run, right? Like you need to get into the tens of thousands of copies to see real significant cost savings at a manufacturer level. So your margin is going to be laser thin. You might be 10 point, even after you break even, you might only be making 10%, 5% even on those incremental units. And I think that probably where the gravy is for a lot of people, correct me if I'm wrong, is when you cover off your base, your minimum run, you're covering off in that campaign. So whatever games you have left over, that's where you might make some profit, because now you're not, those additional units aren't anchored to, acquisition costs and all and so forth. Right.
Right. Yeah. I would say, though, so yes, well, I guess a couple things. So yes, typically the model comes to, hey, you're gonna do your print run and say have leftover copies, and if you've done your math well, you're at least break even, and then there's leftover copies. But what'll happen, the reason that breaks is you're essentially making a bet on those other copies. So like, okay, take a game like Floriferous. Campaign's going really well. Given where we're tracking, maybe we have 2,000 backers or units, right? So if I just printed 2,000 copies, I could fulfill every person, and then and then that would be it. That'd be great. But then there wouldn't be any copies to go forward with. So you're like, okay, well, let's print 3,000 and bring 1,000 copies to retail, or 4,000, bring 2,000 copies. Well, let's say 3,000 or 4,000 might be within the profit margin of the campaign. So you're like, okay, well, I'm betting could get 1,000 of profit at the end of all this, and turn it into 4,000 if we sold an extra units. Right. But what the mistake people can make is, that's true if you're saying 3,000 or 4,000 copies, but let's say you're like, let's do 10,000 copies.
That's a problem.
Yeah. So suddenly you're actually now negative. You've overprinted, which could mean a big upside if they sell. But if they don't sell and they're just sitting around for 4 years, that's a problem. And what I don't think people realize is, like, games stop selling. Like, you have games that have sort of like an evergreen tail, and there aren't that many. And again, Herbaceous is one that continues to sell, for example. Yeah. But if you have a title that you could be in I have a game without saying that overprinted by 1,000 units or so, and we printed more. We sold, but now sitting in a warehouse is 1,000 copies of this game, and the game sells a copy a month. Right. Yeah. Like, so we're talking about 1,000 months of supply, which is a lot. And then even if you're only paying $10, $20 a month on warehouse space, because that's 1,000 games, it's something. I think the other thing just worth noting is, the gravy that I get is making something I'm proud of and having people enjoy it. That value. With a few minor exceptions, I mean, I haven't made any money off of Pencilverse games, right? Yeah. It pays for our internet, which is great. That's a good bill not to have. But really, any money that comes in essentially over the years has paid for, the bank account used to start at 0, go up, end at 0. And then as I've gotten better, some of the titles continue to sell, goes up, ends at 10, and it holds at 10. And so you have a little bit of a buffer, but then, as you have more things going on, you're like, well, I know what it's like to spend a week shipping everything from my house to make this number work, instead of shipping everything from my house, I'm going to use a fulfillment service.
Yeah.
So, but you increased your cost by $1,000 because instead of doing the boxing and packing for free, you're paying a person 50 cents a box to do it.
Right.
So as you're more busy and as you're doing more, you often spend more to manage it.
Yeah.
And that starts eating as well. So I get, this, if you're not having fun, if you're not enjoying what you do, if it doesn't delight you to see people playing a game and having joy in their life, if you can't absorb some of that, you're definitely going to have a rough ride unless you have, a monster hit out of the gate.
So let's talk a little bit about Floriferous. This is the game that's currently on Kickstarter. I think you have like 7 days left or something like that. Right?
Yeah, this was a short campaign, for sure.
So what was the campaign length? Was it like 20 days or?
No, the campaign length was 14.
Oh, wow. Okay.
13 days.
Good for you. So that's a pretty good result for such a short campaign.
Yeah. We, we have a really strong first day. Actually, Kickstarter apparently had a maintenance for 2 hours on our first day, which was no fun. Yep. I can't think of that ever happening during a campaign in all my time. But we were on track to have the best first day of any Pencil First Games product. It fell short by about like $600, which is not a big. It's an interesting crown, but Herbaceous Sprouts still holds that top spot. But no, we had a really strong first day. I attribute that to we started a more active awareness campaign earlier. We had the preview page up earlier, and we're driving people towards it. Did the tabletop simulator version, got review copies out. I used to hold the review copies to the day of launch. I let those videos hit first. And
did that help? Did you find? Because there's the standard convention that you kind of hold those preview or reviewer videos until the campaign launches. One could argue that you benefit from them kind of getting out there early to create buzz, right?
So normally, my up until this campaign, and I'm not actually prepared to say that it was the right decision, but up until this campaign, that absolutely, I mean, that's always how it's been. If somebody gets interested in your thing, you want them to be able to get it then, right? You want that, you want them to say, I'm interested, here's the link, I now have access to it.
Yeah.
And I think it did help create a nice awareness. I think it got people excited. It allowed them to contribute. Net, I could see not doing it as much, but it did. We did generate. If normally I have a preview page where we have 400 or 500 folks signed up for it, that early notification, we got it to about 1,100 or 1,200 right before. So it was a nice jump of people. And then also, my newsletter over the years has grown from each of these campaigns. So, I think I would say it this way. For the folks, if you're where you're on this page, those 4 games, Herbaceous, Sunset Over Water, The Whatnot Cabinet, Sprouts, these are all designed by Steve Finn, solo by Keith Mateka, me, the development and production and design work I do. Those 4 with Beth Sobel. We have a new artist, Clementine Campardu, on this game. But this line of nature, light, easy, super beautiful games, like Floriferous, the page you're looking at, like absolutely is in line with that audience. So reaching out to those folks, it's, I don't want to say like a no-brainer, but like if you've been playing Pencil First Games and you like those things for the reasons that you do, Floriferous absolutely delivers on every check mark in that group. And I think, one of the success stories I've developed with Pencil First Games, and I've learned over time is, and I think, okay, a lot of Kickstarter creators will do their first game, find success. If they don't find success, we don't talk about them, right? The ones that find success, and then because they're creative people, they'll typically do something else. Like the amount of creators that, because you're not in the wild success, like, you have this amazing thing and you inherently have to do it again. You have this thing that worked, they get another designer, they make it. And what they do is they make the mistake of thinking people actually follow, let me say this. they make the mistake of believing that people buy a Kickstarter product for the creator as opposed to wanting the game. And it's both. And so what'll happen is you'll have a, units on a map, like miniatures game, and then you'll be like, let's now do a lightweight, party game, and they'll switch genres and they'll switch themes.
So your whole audience is going to jump ship because they bought a minis game, and now you're hitting them with a light to medium weight party game, right? Yeah. And
so a lot of it's very common to see that, and then they don't understand what happened. They overspent. They did all these decisions. It was like it's a totally different audience. And so, and I've made that, Pencil First Games has sort of made that mistake, but with this line, I've really said, these are games I enjoy and play myself. But we've really tried to stick within this for this group, and then Pencil First Games sort of has other places like Skulk Hollow, in other words. But I think it's just really easy to make that mistake of like, oh well, your Kickstarter backer count's always going to go up. It's like, no, if you switch genres and you switch themes, it's a new audience, and it's something you learn from as you go.
How many of the 16 of all the games you've launched, how many of them are you the designer versus just ones that you've developed or kind of taken on to publish?
Probably, Liftoff, Gem Pact, The Siblings Trouble, 3.5. But coming from it's a little different than coming from the video game space. Board games, more typically a designer has their prototype, they have a game that's developed, they pitch it to a publisher. And actually the bigger the publisher, the more they're like, thanks, we'll see you later. And we're going to now develop it and make it. Yeah. My background is far more collaborative where when you're the product lead, you're sort of all over the place and you're working with the groups and everyone's sort of playing off of each other. For all of the games I work with Steve, these in particular, for sure, Steve's leading the design, but like he doesn't hand it off to me later. Like we end up collaborating through the design. We talk about all the different elements, both in terms of physicality, but the fun, the audience, and that's true with working with Keith on Skulk Hollow is an example where actually. My kid had pitched, I did like a game design thing at his school. Like this is, like years and years ago.
That's cool.
And he wanted to make a game that was 14. He wanted to make a game with one player, like it was 15 people playing all at once. And I was like, I don't know that that's the right thing. And I was like, well, what if it was one person controlling 15 people and the other person controlling one? And he's like, I don't know about that. So I went and then actually built out this really early version, and I'm a big Shadow of Colossus fan. I built this early version of Skulk Hollow where I had the monster board. It really, like, if you look at it today, it's the center of what Skulk Hollow ultimately became. But I really didn't feel like I was delivering on it mechanically. Like I knew the dynamics, the fun, the aesthetic I was going for, but it wasn't my work. I wasn't doing a good enough job to deliver what I wanted. And then, at the time I'd worked with Keith on a variety of other things and brought Keith in. He took over everything, but like it was in the parameters of like, here's where we're trying to go and what we're trying to do. Like,
yeah.
And he did a great job. And then we did play testing together. So for sure, every single one if it's a Pencil First Games, like I'm very heavily involved all the way through, but they've, Steve Finn has done 5 of them or 6 of them. Scott Caputo was the 100 Tory, and then Keith Skulk Hollow. Heroes and Tricks was with John Gilmore about halfway through. And I might be forgetting it, but so, it's folks I enjoy working with and have worked with over the years. So
you don't take like submissions or anything like that. It's mainly kind of your current network that you've built up.
No, I don't take them directly at all. These things take 3 years, 4 years, right? Like it takes a really long time. I gotta want to work with you as a person, like because I'm not a machine. Each project is a game I'm going to want to. I'm heavily involved with, and it's a dwarfing amount of time. Like I'm not trying to like Steve did incredible work on floriferous. I'm really excited. I think it's a great design. We worked on a lot of stuff.
It's gorgeous.
But his time frame of work is in that whatever, 3-month back and forth period, 4 months as we're doing it, and then he's working on other stuff. We play test, he does. But like, I don't know what total hours it is, but there's some amount of time. But from that amount of time to the amount of time to participate in that, do the development, drive the art, then prep the Kickstarter, run the Kickstarter, do the manufacturing, run the retail. It's like, so I have to love it. I have to love the game, or like, then it's not a hobby anymore. Then it's a death stone in my side. And so, ultimately, and Heroes and Tricks was Marco Blanc, but ultimately, let's take the 100 Tory as an example.
Yeah.
So I don't usually take it. Scott was in League of Game Makers. I know Scott well, and he was like pitching games around at a Gen Con. He's like, I really think this is for pencil first games. And I was like, man, I don't take submission. He was like, really want to show it to you. And at the time, oddly, Vincent Dutrait, who's the artist, who's like my favorite board game artist, period, top 3. He had seen Herbaceous and was like, hey, if you ever want to just make a pretty game that isn't about warriors, dragons, or fighting, like, let me know. And so in the back of my mind, I had this idea of like, how am I going to find a game to work on with Vincent? And then Scott was like, he pitched it to me, and I was like, okay, this game's way too heavy. We'd have to not redesign it. That's not fair, but like reduce it and really work on it some more. And I would only do it if Vincent signed up for it. So like, if this works and we got Vincent to say okay, and we could do it all together, all right. And Vincent said okay, and Scott really collapsed some elements of it, and he did a great job. And then we had a lot of fun together, and we were working on the expansion together. So it's not like random person sending me a design, because it's not about it's the whole process. It's the journey for me. So if I'm like, man, I don't think you're going to be, or woman or whoever, like, you're not going to be, this isn't going to be a fun journey together. I'd rather just give it to somebody else, even if it's great. Like, I want to go on journeys that are fun.
No kidding. You've been a 5-time Projects We Love designation from Kickstarter across different campaigns.
I didn't know that number. Thank you.
Yeah. And so if you go on your campaigns you've created and you get the whole grid, then you can see on the grid, it'll actually list which ones are campaigns or projects we love.
Oh, there you go.
I get asked all the time, how do you get that designation? And I think the answer I always give is no one knows. I don't know if you have any inclination, but it seems to be just random, right? Whatever Kickstarter decides something the team likes.
And 5-time again under 16 campaigns. But it's most okay. The team at Kickstarter has changed, actually, changed dramatically in the last week. But prior to that, there were layoffs. There's been some changes. Before that, over time, I had contacts as folks on the team at Kickstarter, which you get because of something or another. And so the most noteworthy thing that I used to do was, and then I don't have any contacts anymore, but this is like 2, 3, 4 years ago, is when I was launching a campaign, I'd write an email and say, hey, by the way, I launched this campaign. And that was it. Not like for the sake of anything other than
let them know
one other place that they might check it out. I really do think it sits on the campaign. Like, I think they evaluate it. I think looking at their newsletters is really good. It shows what they're promoting and how.
Yeah.
And at some point, somebody told me that it's sort of like anyone can bring up, like, within their team, it's like people nominate titles that they think are good, and then there's sort of some committee approval process within the organization. So, basically, do you catch anyone's eye for a good reason? And then they have to, then you're really competing. Like, I don't know if they have a limit each week or whatever, but I think people just need to always remember, when you're running a Kickstarter, man, everyone else is running Kickstarters, right? Yeah. So you might have there were games where I was like, this is for sure going to get a project we love, and it didn't. And I think a big part of it is what else happened that week. And people get, people think about that oftentimes in in terms of, oh, I just got crushed by this big campaign that launched. But, ultimately it's a marketplace that's a dynamic marketplace with a ton of different products releasing. And, we might have a really wonderful looking casual game like Floriferous that is beautiful. And I think it's a game I love. But, there might be 7 other things going on, and those are just the priorities at that point.
So with your YouTube channel, Gaming with Edo, for people that don't know about this channel, can you just give us an overview of kind of what are the basic things that you cover?
Sure. It's really broken into 3 parts. One part is just game reviews. I do game reviews, not so many unboxes anymore, but they're pretty lightweight because I have so many other things going on. There's not a ton of B-roll. There's not a ton of editing. But, I try to give a quick perspective, and over the years, people have come to like my perspective, and they'll watch them. But they're definitely not a high bar in terms of quality of reviews to the marketplace today. But that's okay. The second piece is industry and League of Game Makers. League of Game Makers sort of quieted down over the years, but it's really a spectrum of topics for Kickstarter creators, designers, and anyone really in the board game publishing, designing, making space or adjacent to it. I do a ton of Q&As. I try to create materials and share them. So I've shared a bunch of the working spreadsheets that I've used in the past. I have a Kickstarter Basics and Advanced series. I do some things on sort of the emotional toll of things. So it's really just me trying to share anything I've learned over the years. And the channel has been around for a long time as well. So it's not like one video. Like that playlist probably has over 100 videos, all of which I still watch today and be like, this is pretty useful. And then the last one is the last one is just pencil first game stuff. So like when we do a how to play or a live stream or something like that, they'll get posted there.
So if people want to follow this campaign, Floriferous, simply go to Kickstarter and type in Floriferous. I'm going to put a link.
You won't find any other game named that way.
Yeah, you won't. Exactly. And I mean, I'm pretty sure it shows up as soon as you go under games because it's doing quite well and it's very attractive, the box. I'll put a link as well in the show notes. So if anybody listening or watching wants to find a campaign quickly, there'll be just a quick link that they can get to the Kickstarter page.
I appreciate that very much.
No worries. And if people want to follow along on some of this pencil first journey, is the YouTube channel the best way to do that, or is there a Facebook page, or how best do they follow along?
I think the best way is there is a Pencil First Games community group. This actually was something we started end of last year, and has been great. It's that we have the Pencil First Games just company page, which is like announcements, but this is really where we talk about things, we share, people engage with each other. It's really a nice space that I've come to enjoy. But those are the 2 best places. Otherwise, you can just follow on Twitter or Instagram with @PencilFirst. Or Pencil First Games on Instagram, and those are good ways to just see the stuff as it comes up. The Gaming with Edo channel, I'm happy for anyone to check out and take a look at. But it's a little heavy right now with Floriferous stuff. But generally speaking, that is, 2/3 or more of it is reviews and industry stuff, and then every once in a while a Pencil First Games thing. But I certainly welcome anyone to check it out.
Yeah, even the Floriferous stuff on there, I think is good to watch. I was watching the one video, which is Kickstarter Advanced, what I would do differently.
Right.
It was great, right? You get into kind of the weeds on what are some of the things that you've changed up going into this particular campaign, and I think there's a lot of good learning there for people who may be launching their own games. So I want to thank you for your contributions of games to the industry. But also as a content creator, helping pass on some of these learnings to others. I know that, in terms of resources, there's so many resources out there for people who are looking to get into this industry. You just got to go and start watching videos and start checking out what some of these content creators have done. Everybody wants to help everybody, which seems the tone.
That's really what's so wonderful about the board game space. I mean, I talked about the why it's fun to creatively make games, but the amount of selfless help and engagement from other creators and business owners is amazing. And it's really, from my experience, very different than professional video games, like you just don't have that same knowledge share and transfer and awareness.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of reasons why that's much more complicated. But in board games, if you're like, hey, I want to learn, figure it out, there's the resources, but then there's tons of people that'll just give you their perspective. You got to be careful. Yeah. Some advice isn't as good as others. Always try to understand, if this person's used to running gigantic mega campaigns and you're starting your own little one, maybe don't spend what they spend, right? Like you got to, but certainly everyone's more than happy to help. That's my experience.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. And I wish you all the best success with this game.
Awesome. Cheers. Thanks so much. Bye.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.